Imagine standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at the vast unknown below. Your heart races, your palms sweat, and your thoughts spiral with what ifs. What if I fail? What if I can't make it? What if I'm not good enough? These fears are universal at some point. Everyone has felt the intense grip of fear, holding us back from taking that leap, from stepping into the unknown. But here's the shocking truth. What if I told you that your fear isn't as real as it feels? What if the fear that seems so powerful, so overwhelming, is nothing more than a mental construct, a story your mind is telling you? What if, instead of standing frozen in fear, you could transform that energy into something powerful, into courage, into wisdom, into action? The place where we dive deep into the philosophy, psychology, and practical steps that can truly change the way we experience life. Today, we're going to explore a groundbreaking concept: how fear is not your enemy, it's your teacher. This isn't just a fluffy self-help idea. It's a proven mindset that has transformed lives across centuries and across cultures. And guess what? It can transform your life too. In this video, we'll unpack powerful lessons drawn from Buddhist philosophy, which teach us to understand and embrace fear in ways you might never have considered before. We'll explore how fear connects us all as human beings, how it can be a sign of growth rather than a threat, and how we can use it as a catalyst for courage and wisdom. If you've ever felt like fear has been holding you back, or if you've ever wondered why certain challenges seem so overwhelming, this video is for you. By the end of it, you'll have a whole new perspective on fear and some powerful tools to turn it into one of your greatest allies. But before we dive in, if you're new to the channel or haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button now and turn on the notifications. That way, you won't miss out on any of our upcoming deep dives into life-changing topics. And if you find this video helpful, don't forget to like and share it with anyone who might need a little extra courage today. Let's dive in. Buddhist teachings offer profound insights into overcoming fear by addressing its root causes and helping us reframe how we perceive challenges. At its core, fear is not as concrete as it appears. It is often a mental construct shaped by our attachment to outcomes, resistance to change, or anxiety about uncertainty. Understanding these elements through the lens of Buddhist principles can help us shift our mindset, transforming fear from an obstacle into a tool for personal growth and inner peace. One of the foundational teachings is the concept of impermanence, or anicca. Impermanence reminds us that nothing in life is permanent, not our fears, our joys, or the circumstances we face. When we resist this truth, clinging to the idea that things must remain stable or predictable, we set ourselves up for anxiety and fear. For instance, consider the fear of losing a job. The thought of financial instability or a shift in identity can feel paralyzing. However, embracing the impermanent nature of life allows us to see this situation as temporary. A job loss could open the door to opportunities we never considered. By accepting that change is inevitable, we can reduce our resistance to it and approach life with greater adaptability. This idea of impermanence can also be observed in our daily lives. Think about the changing seasons, the growth of a child, or even the fleeting nature of emotions. A moment of intense anger or sadness often feels all-encompassing, but with time, it fades. Recognizing this natural ebb and flow allows us to approach life with less attachment to specific outcomes. The Buddhist perspective teaches that clinging to impermanent things, whether it's material possessions, relationships, or even our sense of self, inevitably leads to suffering. When we internalize this, fear starts to lose its grip, and we become more open to the possibilities that change can bring. Closely related to this is the realization that fear itself is often an illusion. Fear frequently arises from our imagination, fueled by what-if scenarios that may never come to pass. Consider someone standing at the edge of a cliff, trembling not because they are in immediate danger, but because their mind conjures up vivid images of falling. This is a classic example of how fear is not rooted in reality, but in our interpretation of potential outcomes. The Buddha taught that fear is a product of the mind, a thought pattern, rather than an immutable truth. Once we recognize this, we can begin to disarm fear by confronting it with awareness. For example, when fear arises, Instead of letting it spiral into panic, we can pause and ask ourselves, is this fear based on actual danger or a story I'm telling myself? This simple practice can shift our focus from reacting impulsively to responding mindfully. Mindfulness, or sati, is another powerful tool for addressing fear. By staying present in the moment, we can separate ourselves from the mental narratives that feed our anxieties. Fear often thrives in the past or the future, regretting what has happened or worrying about what might come. However, when we anchor ourselves in the present, we create space to observe our thoughts without being consumed by them. Imagine a person preparing for a big presentation. Their mind might race with fears of failure or embarrassment, but through mindfulness, they can bring their attention back to the task at hand. Simple practices like focusing on the breath or engaging fully with the sensations of the moment can break the cycle of fear and help us approach challenges with clarity. An essential aspect of mindfulness is cultivating non-attachment to our thoughts. When we identify too closely with fearful thoughts, we give them power. By observing these thoughts as passing events rather than ultimate truths, we can create a healthier relationship with our mind. A useful analogy is to think of thoughts as clouds passing through the sky. They may temporarily obscure the sun, but they are not permanent and do not define the sky itself. This perspective helps us detach from the grip of fear and realize that we are more than our fleeting emotions. Buddhism also emphasizes understanding the nature of suffering, or dukkha. Fear is one form of suffering that arises from our relationship with the world. It often emerges when we feel threatened, whether by uncertainty, loss, or perceived danger. A key insight from Buddhist teachings is that suffering is universal. Everyone experiences fear in some form, whether it's the fear of failure, rejection, or even existential fears like the fear of death. This universality can be comforting because it reminds us that we are not alone in our struggles. Knowing that fear is a shared human experience helps to reduce its intensity and makes it feel less isolating. For example, consider a student fearing the results of an important exam. Their fear is not unique. Millions of students around the world have faced similar anxieties. Recognizing this shared experience can help the student feel less overwhelmed and more connected to others. The Buddhist approach encourages us to see fear as part of the natural flow of life, not a personal failing. This shift in perspective allows us to approach fear with greater compassion for ourselves and others. Letting go of attachment, or tanha, is another cornerstone of Buddhist teachings that can help us overcome fear. Attachment often fuels our anxieties because we cling to the belief that we need certain things or outcomes to be happy or secure. For instance, someone might fear losing a relationship because they've tied their sense of worth to their partner's presence. This attachment creates a dependency that amplifies fear. Buddhism teaches that letting go of attachment doesn't mean we stop caring, but rather that we stop clinging. It's about finding freedom from the illusion that external conditions can provide lasting security. Practicing non-attachment can transform how we approach challenges. For example, instead of fearing the outcome of a job interview, we can focus on doing our best without becoming overly fixated on whether we get the job. This mindset not only reduces anxiety, but also allows us to engage more fully with the present moment. Similarly, letting go of the need to control every aspect of life can alleviate much of the fear that stems from uncertainty. Life is inherently unpredictable, and trying to control it only creates more stress. By accepting this unpredictability, we can approach life with greater equanimity. Finally, cultivating patience, or khandi, is a vital practice for overcoming fear. Fear often arises from impatience, a desire for quick answers, immediate results, or certainty in uncertain situations. For example, someone awaiting medical test results might feel an overwhelming sense of dread. Patience allows us to sit with this discomfort without being consumed by it. It helps us trust that things will unfold in their own time and that we have the resilience to face whatever comes. Patience also helps us tolerate the physical and emotional sensations of fear. When fear arises, our natural instinct might be to escape or suppress it. However, by practicing patience, we can learn to observe these sensations with curiosity rather than resistance. Over time, this desensitizes us to fear, making it less overwhelming. Additionally, being patient with ourselves is crucial. Fear often comes with self-judgment. We worry that we're not strong enough or capable enough. Patience reminds us that growth takes time and that it's okay to stumble along the way. Incorporating these teachings into daily life can lead to profound transformations. Whether it's embracing impermanence, seeing through the illusion of fear, practicing mindfulness, understanding suffering, letting go of attachment, or cultivating patience, each principle offers a pathway to greater peace and resilience. Fear is not something to be feared itself, but an opportunity to deepen our awareness and grow. By engaging with these practices, we can learn to navigate fear with wisdom and courage, ultimately creating a life of greater freedom and joy. Fear often takes root in our resistance to change, an inherent desire to cling to what we know and control. This resistance creates an illusion that stability is attainable, that the relationships, possessions, and circumstances we cherish can remain untouched by time. But life, as Buddhism teaches, is characterized by impermanence, or anicca. Understanding and embracing this truth can be transformative, turning fear into an opportunity for growth and acceptance. I remember vividly a time when I faced the fear of losing my job. The thought of unemployment filled me with dread. How would I manage financially? How would I explain this to my family? And what would this mean for my sense of self-worth? These questions ran on an endless loop in my mind. However, as I delved deeper into the principle of impermanence, I began to see my fear differently. Rather than viewing the potential loss as a catastrophe, I reframed it as an inevitable part of life's ebb and flow. This understanding didn't eliminate the challenges of that period, but softened the grip of anxiety, allowing me to explore new paths with a sense of curiosity rather than desperation. In retrospect, that experience opened doors I hadn't even considered, enriching my personal and professional growth. A story that encapsulates this lesson beautifully is that of a farmer in an old parable. The farmer's horse runs away, and his neighbors lament his bad luck. "Maybe," he responds. The next day, the horse returns with a herd of wild horses, and the neighbors rejoice at his good fortune. "Maybe," he replies again. Later, the farmer's son tries to tame one of the wild horses, falls, and breaks his leg. Once more, the neighbors sympathize with his misfortune, but the farmer offers the same nonchalant "maybe." A week later, soldiers arrive to conscript young men into the army, but bypass the farmer's injured son. This story highlights the transient nature of all events, whether we perceive them as good or bad. Life is a series of interconnected changes, and attaching ourselves to any single moment as permanent leads only to suffering. Embracing impermanence also allows us to approach challenges with greater flexibility and resilience. Take, for instance, the dynamic nature of relationships. A friendship or romantic connection that feels deeply fulfilling at one point may shift over time due to circumstances or personal growth. While the end of a relationship often brings sorrow, accepting impermanence can help us cherish the positive moments and let go without bitterness. By understanding that change is not a betrayal but a natural progression, we can navigate emotional transitions with grace. Nature provides constant reminders of impermanence, offering us a tangible way to reflect on its role in our lives. Consider the changing seasons. Winter's stark barrenness gives way to spring's vibrant blooms, summer's warmth, and autumn's golden hues, only to cycle back again. This perpetual transformation is neither good nor bad. It simply is. Observing these changes can serve as a meditation, helping us internalize the idea that no state, no matter how joyous or painful, is everlasting. A practical way to embody this principle is to develop a daily habit of noticing and reflecting on the transient nature of the world around us. Watch a flower bloom and wilt. Notice the shifting light of the day, or observe the way your own thoughts and emotions evolve over hours or weeks. By grounding ourselves in these observations, we can build a deeper acceptance of life's impermanence. This doesn't mean detaching or becoming indifferent, but rather learning to experience each moment fully, knowing that it, too, will pass. On a broader scale, embracing impermanence helps us navigate societal changes and uncertainties. The rapid evolution of technology, for example, often evokes fear in those who feel left behind. Yet, understanding impermanence reminds us that adaptation is part of the human experience. The fear of being rendered obsolete, whether professionally or socially, can give way to a mindset of continuous learning and reinvention. History is full of examples where embracing change has led to innovation and growth, from the Industrial Revolution to the digital age. Even in moments of profound personal loss, the principle of impermanence offers solace. Grieving the death of a loved one, while deeply painful, can also bring clarity about the fleeting nature of life. By embracing this truth, we can honor the time we shared without being consumed by longing for what is no longer. This perspective is not about minimizing the pain of loss, but about finding a way to coexist with it, knowing that our emotions, like everything else, will evolve with time. Another poignant example comes from the world of sports. Athletes, who often peak at a young age, must grapple with the reality that their physical abilities will decline. For many, this can be a source of fear and identity crisis. However, those who accept the impermanence of their prime years often find ways to channel their experience into coaching, mentoring, or other meaningful pursuits. This transition highlights how impermanence, when embraced, can lead to new and fulfilling opportunities, even in everyday situations. The principle of impermanence offers profound insights. Imagine being stuck in traffic, feeling the frustration build as the minutes tick by. Recognizing that this moment, like all others, is temporary can bring a surprising sense of calm. Instead of resisting the reality of the situation, you can use the time to reflect, listen to a podcast, or simply breathe. This shift in perspective doesn't change the external circumstance, but transforms your internal experience. In conclusion, impermanence is not a concept to be feared, but a truth to be embraced. It liberates us from the illusion of control and allows us to engage with life's uncertainties with greater equanimity. Whether we are facing personal challenges, societal changes, or the inevitability of aging, understanding the transient nature of all things enables us to let go of fear and live more fully in the present. By reflecting on the impermanence evident in nature, relationships, and our own inner experiences, we can cultivate a mindset that welcomes change as a teacher rather than resists it as an adversary. This shift doesn't eliminate fear entirely, but repositions it as a natural part of our journey, one that we can face with wisdom and grace. Fear often feels like an overwhelming force, gripping us with its intensity and convincing us that danger is imminent. However, much of what we perceive as fear is not rooted in reality, but is instead a construct of our minds. This understanding is both liberating and empowering, as it allows us to question fear's validity and separate genuine threats from imagined scenarios. By recognizing fear as an illusion, we can reframe our responses and live with greater clarity and confidence. The human mind is incredibly adept at generating vivid, what-if scenarios. This capacity is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it helps us anticipate potential challenges and plan for the future. On the other, it can spiral into catastrophizing, where every possibility becomes a worst-case scenario. For instance, imagine someone about to give a public presentation. Their mind might conjure fears of stumbling over their words, being judged harshly, or completely failing to communicate their message. None of these outcomes have occurred, yet the body reacts as if the threat is real. Heart racing, palms sweating, voice trembling. This is the illusion of fear at work, turning hypothetical situations into perceived dangers. A striking example of overcoming this illusion is the story of a climber who struggled with a fear of heights. Despite being securely harnessed and in a controlled environment, he found himself frozen midway up a rock face, gripped by the fear of falling. Rationally, he knew he was safe, the ropes were secure, and experienced guides were present, but his mind created a vivid image of plummeting to the ground. When he finally acknowledged that his fear was a mental construct rather than an actual threat, he was able to refocus on the task at hand. By grounding himself in the present and focusing on his movements rather than the imagined fall, he completed the climb. This shift in perspective illustrates how recognizing fear as an illusion can dissolve its power over us. One of the key reasons fear feels so real is the body's physiological response. When we perceive a threat, whether real or imagined, the brain activates the fight or flight response. Adrenaline surges, our heart rate increases, and we become hyper-aware of our surroundings. While this reaction is essential for survival in genuinely dangerous situations, it is often triggered unnecessarily in modern life. For example, someone receiving a critical email from their boss might experience the same physiological response as if they were facing a physical threat. The fear in this scenario is not about immediate harm, but about imagined consequences: losing their job, disappointing their team, or damaging their reputation. Recognizing that these fears are stories the mind has created can help to diffuse the emotional intensity. To confront the illusion of fear, it's essential to develop a habit of questioning its basis. Whenever fear arises, pause and ask yourself, is this fear based on a real and immediate threat? Or is it a story my mind is telling me? This simple question can create a moment of clarity, breaking the automatic reaction and allowing space for rational assessment. For instance, someone afraid of flying might imagine catastrophic scenarios every time turbulence occurs. By asking whether their fear is based on actual danger or a mental narrative, they can remind themselves of the safety statistics of air travel and the expertise of pilots, thereby reducing their anxiety. Another helpful strategy is to focus on the present moment. Fear often drags us into the future, imagining scenarios that haven't happened and may never happen. Grounding techniques, such as deep breathing or observing your surroundings, can anchor you in the here and now, where the majority of fears lose their grip. For example, a student nervous about an upcoming exam might spiral into fears of failing, disappointing their family, or derailing their future plans. By bringing their attention to the present, studying effectively, taking practice tests, or even simply acknowledging their effort, they can shift from fear-driven paralysis to purposeful action. The illusion of fear becomes even more apparent when we reflect on past experiences. How many times have we feared the worst, only to find that reality was far less daunting? Consider someone who dreaded a job interview, fearing they would forget their responses, make a poor impression, or be met with hostility. In most cases, the interview turns out to be a straightforward conversation, and even if it doesn't lead to a job offer, it's rarely the catastrophic event imagined. These moments serve as reminders that fear often exaggerates reality, and what we anticipate is seldom as bad as we fear. Fear also thrives on uncertainty, which is an inherent part of life. The unknown can feel threatening because it lacks predictability, and our minds fill in the gaps with imagined dangers. However, uncertainty also holds potential for growth and discovery. A person considering a career change might fear stepping into the unknown, worrying about failure or regret. Yet, many who take that leap find opportunities they never imagined. Whether it's discovering a new passion, meeting inspiring people, or building a more fulfilling life, embracing uncertainty as a space for possibility rather than a breeding ground for fear can fundamentally alter how we approach challenges. Another way to dismantle fear's illusion is to expose ourselves to the situations we fear, gradually and intentionally. This practice, often referred to as desensitization, helps rewire the brain's response. For example, someone with social anxiety might fear attending a crowded party, imagining judgment or rejection from others. By starting with smaller gatherings and observing that their fears don't materialize, they can build confidence over time. Each positive experience weakens the mind's fearful narrative, replacing it with evidence of safety and resilience. Stories of public figures also highlight the illusory nature of fear. Consider J.K. Rowling, who famously faced rejection from multiple publishers before finding success with the Harry Potter series. Her fear of failure could have stopped her from pursuing her passion, but by persisting and reframing rejection as part of the journey, she ultimately achieved unparalleled success. Such stories remind us that fear often stands as a gatekeeper to our greatest achievements, and facing it head-on can lead to transformative outcomes. Ultimately, seeing the illusion of fear requires both awareness and practice. It begins with acknowledging that fear is not inherently bad. It is a signal, a survival mechanism, but one that can become distorted. By questioning fear's validity, grounding ourselves in the present, and reframing uncertainty as opportunity. We can loosen its hold and approach life with greater courage and clarity. Fear will always arise, but when we see it for what it truly is, a fleeting mental construct, rather than an unchangeable truth, we gain the freedom to act in alignment with our values and aspirations, rather than being paralyzed by imagined threats. Mindfulness is a practice of grounding ourselves in the present moment, offering an antidote to the pervasive fears that often arise from dwelling on the past or worrying about the future. Fear tends to thrive in these mental realms, feeding off imagined scenarios and unresolved regrets. When we cultivate mindfulness, we create a space where we can observe our thoughts and emotions without becoming entangled in them, transforming reactive patterns into thoughtful, deliberate responses. The mind has a natural tendency to wander, replaying past experiences or forecasting future outcomes. This can lead to a cycle of fear and anxiety, as we relive mistakes or anticipate problems that may never occur. Imagine a professional about to present at an important meeting. Instead of focusing on the present, preparing their materials, and ensuring they are rested, they might find themselves obsessing over a past instance where they stumbled over their words, or imagining an audience filled with judgmental stares. These thoughts, while rooted in past and future concerns, create real physical and emotional tension in the present. Mindfulness offers a way to break this cycle by bringing attention back to the here and now, allowing us to engage with reality as it is, rather than as our fears construct it to be. A powerful example of mindfulness in action can be found in the life of a busy mother juggling the demands of raising children. She may worry about her kids' future, whether they'll succeed in school, make good friends, or grow up to lead fulfilling lives. At the same time, she might replay past moments where she felt she fell short as a parent, questioning her decisions or actions. These fears, while understandable, can become overwhelming and detract from the joy of spending time with her children in the present. Through mindfulness, this mother learns to redirect her attention to the present moment, listening to her child's laughter, feeling the warmth of their embrace, or simply noticing the rhythm of her own breath. By anchoring herself in the now, she can experience these fleeting moments fully and respond to her children's needs with clarity and patience rather than from a place of fear or guilt. The transformative power of mindfulness lies in its ability to shift us from reacting impulsively to choosing our responses thoughtfully. In moments of fear or stress, our natural instinct is often to fight, flee, or freeze. These automatic reactions are rooted in the brain's survival mechanisms, which, while useful in genuine danger, can lead to unnecessary suffering when applied to imagined threats. Mindfulness interrupts this automaticity, giving us the space to pause and assess the situation. For instance, consider someone who receives a terse email from their boss. Their initial reaction might be fear, assuming they've made a mistake or are in trouble. This could lead to a cascade of stress, possibly culminating in a hasty or defensive reply. With mindfulness, however, they can take a moment to breathe, recognize their emotional reaction, and approach the email with curiosity rather than panic. This thoughtful response not only reduces their own stress, but also fosters clearer communication. Practicing mindfulness doesn't require elaborate rituals or significant time investments. It can be as simple as taking a few deep breaths when fear arises. A practical breathing exercise involves inhaling deeply through the nose for a count of 4, holding the breath for a count of 4, and exhaling slowly through the mouth for a count of 6. This practice, sometimes called the 4-4-6 technique, calms the nervous system and brings focus back to the present. For example, a student preparing for an exam might find their mind racing with worries about failure or forgetting key concepts. By pausing to practice this breathing exercise, they can calm their racing heart, regain focus, and approach their studies with renewed concentration. Mindfulness also helps us cultivate a more compassionate relationship with ourselves. Fear often carries an undercurrent of self-judgment, worrying that we're not good enough, that we'll fail, or that we'll let others down. These thoughts, left unchecked, can erode our self-confidence and make us hesitant to take risks or embrace challenges. By practicing mindfulness, we learn to observe these judgments without becoming consumed by them. Instead of labeling ourselves as inadequate or flawed, We can acknowledge the presence of these thoughts and let them pass, much like clouds drifting across the sky. This shift fosters a sense of self-compassion, allowing us to approach our fears with kindness rather than criticism. Another aspect of mindfulness is its ability to anchor us in the sensations of the body, which can act as a grounding force during moments of fear. Fear often manifests physically tightness in the chest, a racing heart, or shallow breathing. These sensations, while uncomfortable, are not inherently dangerous. By bringing mindful awareness to these physical experiences, we can observe them without resistance, allowing them to dissipate naturally. For example, someone feeling anxious before a job interview might notice their palms sweating and their breath quickening. Instead of trying to suppress these sensations, they can acknowledge them with curiosity, perhaps silently saying to themselves, "I feel my breath is shallow. I feel my hands are sweaty." This practice helps to neutralize the fear response and fosters a sense of control over the situation. Mindfulness is not about eliminating fear, but about changing our relationship with it. Fear is a natural and inevitable part of life, and attempting to avoid it entirely would be unrealistic. Instead, mindfulness teaches us to coexist with fear, to see it as a passing experience rather than an insurmountable obstacle. This perspective allows us to approach fear with openness and curiosity, using it as a signal to explore rather than a barrier to avoid. For many, mindfulness becomes a gateway to a deeper understanding of themselves and their patterns. Over time, consistent practice reveals recurring themes in our fears and anxieties, shedding light on the beliefs and assumptions that underpin them. For instance, someone who frequently fears rejection might discover a deeper narrative about their self-worth or past experiences of exclusion. By bringing mindful awareness to these underlying patterns, they can begin to dismantle the stories that perpetuate their fears and replace them with more empowering beliefs. In daily life, mindfulness can be seamlessly integrated into even the most mundane activities. Washing dishes, for example, can become a mindful practice by focusing on the sensation of the water, the texture of the sponge, and the act of cleaning. Similarly, walking can be an opportunity to practice mindfulness by noticing the rhythm of your steps, the feel of the ground beneath your feet, and the sights and sounds around you. These small moments of presence build a foundation of mindfulness that extends into more challenging situations, making it easier to remain grounded when fear arises. Ultimately, mindfulness is a skill that grows with practice, offering profound benefits for managing fear and living more fully in the present. By transforming reactive patterns into thoughtful responses, grounding ourselves in the here and now, and cultivating self-compassion, we can face life's uncertainties with greater ease and resilience. In doing so, we not only reduce the grip of fear, but also create space for joy, connection, and a deeper appreciation of life's moments, however fleeting they may be. Suffering, known as dukkha in Buddhist teachings, is a universal aspect of the human experience. It encompasses not only physical pain, but also emotional struggles, fears, and the dissatisfaction that arises from the impermanent nature of life. Fear, as a form of suffering, connects all of us in a shared experience of vulnerability and uncertainty. Recognizing this universality is not only a source of comfort, but also a pathway to greater compassion and resilience. At its core, fear arises when we face uncertainty, loss, or perceived danger. These experiences are not unique to any individual. They are woven into the fabric of human life. Understanding this shared reality can transform how we perceive our own fears. Rather than seeing them as personal failures or weaknesses, we can view them as part of a larger, collective journey. For instance, when I realized that my fears, whether of rejection, failure, or the unknown, were not unique to me but something every human grapples with, I felt a profound sense of connection to others. This insight helped me feel less isolated in my struggles and more equipped to face them with courage and acceptance. A poignant example of this shared experience is seen in communities recovering from natural disasters. Take, for instance, a town struck by a hurricane. In the aftermath, residents may grapple with the fear of losing their homes, livelihoods, or even loved ones. Initially, this fear might feel overwhelming and deeply personal. However, as neighbors come together to rebuild, share resources, and support one another, they often discover a profound strength in their shared vulnerability. The recognition that everyone is navigating the same fears fosters solidarity and resilience, turning individual suffering into a collective force for recovery and renewal. This principle is not limited to extraordinary circumstances like natural disasters. It plays out in everyday life as well. Imagine a student preparing for a critical exam. They might fear failure, disappointing their family, or falling short of their aspirations. While this fear feels intensely personal in the moment, it is a universal experience shared by students everywhere. Realizing this can be immensely comforting. It shifts the narrative from, "I am struggling alone," to "this is part of the human experience." It allows the student to approach their fear with greater perspective, knowing they are not alone in their challenges. Fear, as a subset of suffering, also reveals much about the expectations and attachments we carry. For example, someone who fears losing a job may be deeply attached to the identity and security that job provides. While this attachment is natural, it is also a source of suffering because it ties our sense of stability to external circumstances. Buddhist teachings encourage us to examine these attachments and recognize that much of our suffering arises from clinging to things that are, by nature, impermanent. This doesn't mean we stop valuing our jobs, relationships, or possessions. Rather, it invites us to hold them with a sense of openness, acknowledging their impermanence without letting that impermanence define our happiness. Another layer to understanding dukkha is acknowledging that suffering is not a punishment or a sign of failure. It is simply a fact of existence. This reframing is critical in transforming how we respond to fear. Often, when faced with fear, we add layers of judgment to our experience. Why am I so scared? Why can't I be stronger? These judgments intensify our suffering, making it harder to address the root cause of our fear. By accepting that fear is a natural response, we can let go of self-criticism and approach our emotions with greater compassion and clarity. Consider the experience of a person navigating the fear of public speaking. They might feel their heart race, their palms sweat, and their voice shake. These physical and emotional responses can feel paralyzing, especially if they interpret them as signs of inadequacy. However, by recognizing that these reactions are universal, that even the most seasoned speakers experience them, they can reduce the intensity of their fear. This shift in perspective allows them to focus on their message rather than their discomfort, ultimately leading to a more confident and authentic delivery. One practical way to integrate this understanding into daily life is to remind yourself, "This is part of being human, and I'm not alone." This simple phrase can be a powerful anchor during moments of fear or stress. For instance, someone feeling overwhelmed by the challenges of parenthood might use this reminder to reconnect with the broader experience of parenting. Knowing that millions of others are facing similar struggles can provide a sense of solidarity and reduce the weight of self-imposed expectations. Understanding the universality of suffering also deepens our capacity for empathy. When we recognize that everyone carries their own fears and struggles, we become more attuned to the needs of others. This empathy can transform relationships, fostering deeper connections and mutual support. For example, a manager who understands that their employees may fear failure or judgment is more likely to create an environment of psychological safety. This, in turn, encourages open communication and collaboration, benefiting both the individuals and the team as a whole. In addition to fostering empathy, this perspective helps us approach life's uncertainties with greater resilience. Fear often arises when we feel unprepared for the unknown, whether it's a career change, a health diagnosis, or a global crisis. By recognizing that uncertainty is a shared aspect of the human condition, we can draw strength from the collective experiences of those who have navigated similar challenges. This doesn't eliminate the fear itself, but reframes it as a natural part of growth and change, making it easier to move forward despite the discomfort. Another dimension of dukkha is its role as a teacher. Suffering, including fear, often holds valuable lessons about our values, priorities, and inner strength. For instance, Someone who fears losing a close relationship might discover how deeply they value connection and learn to express their appreciation more openly. Similarly, someone who fears failure might uncover a hidden reservoir of resilience and adaptability as they face challenges head-on. By approaching fear with curiosity rather than resistance, we can uncover these insights and use them to grow both personally and spiritually. Even in moments of acute fear, such as during a medical emergency, the principles of dukkha can provide solace. A patient awaiting test results may feel a profound sense of dread, imagining worst-case scenarios. However, by recognizing that this fear is a shared experience felt by countless others in similar situations, they can find comfort in the universality of their emotions. This perspective doesn't negate the difficulty of the situation, but offers a sense of solidarity and a reminder that fear is not an isolated experience. Ultimately, understanding the nature of suffering allows us to reframe our relationship with fear. It shifts fear from being an adversary to being a companion on our journey, a reminder of our shared humanity and our capacity for resilience. By embracing this perspective, we can face life's challenges with greater equanimity, knowing that we are not alone and that every experience, no matter how difficult, is an opportunity to deepen our understanding of ourselves and our place in the world. Attachment, or tanha in Buddhist teachings, is often at the root of much of our fear and suffering. It refers to the craving or clinging to certain outcomes, people, or even our own identities, believing that these external factors are the source of our happiness and security. This attachment creates fear because, as life is inherently unpredictable, we cannot control everything. The more tightly we hold on to a specific outcome, whether it's getting a particular job, achieving a certain grade, or maintaining a relationship, the more we subject ourselves to the anxiety of losing or not attaining these things. The fear of loss is inextricably tied to the intensity of our attachment. The idea of letting go of attachment can be difficult to grasp, especially in a world where so much of our value and self-worth is placed on external achievements or possessions. But Buddhist teachings emphasize that true freedom comes not from possessing or controlling, but from releasing our grip on the things that bind us. Letting go doesn't mean giving up, it means acknowledging the impermanence of everything and accepting that we cannot control all aspects of our lives. By doing so, we free ourselves from the fear that arises from the uncertainty of life. Reflecting on this, I can think of a time when I struggled with attachment in my own life. I was deeply invested in my job, constantly chasing promotions and accolades, believing that these achievements would bring me fulfillment. The fear of not meeting expectations or failing to advance often consumed me. However, when I began to practice non-attachment, I realized that the source of my anxiety wasn't the job itself, but my attachment to the idea of success and recognition. Letting go of this attachment didn't mean I stopped caring about my work. Rather, I began to approach it with greater freedom, focusing on doing my best without being attached to the outcome. The shift allowed me to find peace in the process, rather than in the result. One story that illustrates the power of letting go of attachment is that of a student who was constantly anxious about their grades. From the outside, it seemed like they had everything figured out: an impeccable academic record, a clear path toward a prestigious university, and a bright future ahead. But beneath this facade, they were paralyzed by the fear of failure. Every exam was a source of intense stress, as they felt that a single poor grade could derail their future. The fear of not meeting expectations weighed heavily on them, and it became a constant source of anxiety. However, one day, after a particularly grueling study session, the student had an epiphany. They realized that their attachment to grades was fueling their fear. They had been so focused on the outcome, getting an A, that they had forgotten to enjoy the learning process. The fear of failure was a result of their rigid attachment to the idea that success was measured solely by the grades they received. What if they shifted their focus from the end result to the effort and learning itself? This realization changed everything. The student began to approach their studies with a new mindset. Rather than obsessing over perfect grades, they focused on the effort they put into their work and the knowledge they gained along the way. Their fear of failure diminished because their self-worth was no longer tied to a specific outcome. They learned to appreciate the journey, not just the destination. This shift in perspective allowed them to perform better academically because they were no longer weighed down by the fear of failure. They found peace in the process, rather than in the result. The concept of non-attachment is also essential in our relationships with others. We often form deep attachments to people, whether it's our family, friends, or romantic partners, believing that our happiness is dependent on these connections. While relationships are an important source of joy and fulfillment, excessive attachment can lead to fear, especially when we feel that our emotional security is dependent on someone else's actions or feelings. The fear of losing a loved one, of experiencing rejection, or of not being able to maintain a relationship can be paralyzing. However, non-attachment in relationships doesn't mean detachment or indifference. It means accepting that people, like everything else, are impermanent. People change, circumstances evolve, and life takes unexpected turns. When we can learn to let go of the need to control or possess relationships, we free ourselves from the fear of loss. We can love more fully because we are no longer holding on with an iron grip. By practicing non-attachment, we create space for our relationships to thrive naturally, without the weight of anxiety or possessiveness. One practical way to practice non-attachment in our daily lives is by setting intentions rather than rigid goals. Goals are often outcomes that we attach ourselves to, such as achieving a certain weight, earning a specific amount of money, or obtaining a particular job title. These goals can create fear because they are often tied to external factors that are beyond our control. If we don't achieve these goals, we feel like failures, and that fear of failure can become debilitating. Instead of fixating on a rigid goal, try setting an intention. An intention is a guiding principle, a value that shapes the way we approach our actions, without attachment to the specific outcome. For example, if you want to improve your physical health, rather than setting the goal of losing 20 pounds, you could set the intention to prioritize self-care and make healthy choices every day. This intention allows you to focus on the process rather than the result. It removes the fear of not meeting an arbitrary target because the focus is on progress, not perfection. Similarly, in your career, instead of fixating on a specific job title or salary, set the intention to do meaningful work, to grow your skills, and to contribute value to others. This intention gives you direction without attaching your worth to a specific job or outcome. It allows you to find fulfillment in the journey, regardless of where it leads. Non-attachment also plays a significant role in how we handle failure. When we are overly attached to a specific outcome, failure can feel like a personal defeat. It can trigger feelings of inadequacy and fear of never being able to succeed. But when we practice non-attachment, we see failure not as an end, but as part of the process. Failure becomes a lesson, an opportunity to learn and grow, rather than a reflection of our worth. For instance, an entrepreneur who faces a setback, whether it's a failed product launch, a missed business opportunity, or a financial loss, can be devastated if they are overly attached to the idea of success. But if they practice non-attachment, they can view the failure with a sense of equanimity. They can look at it as an opportunity to refine their ideas, to learn from their mistakes, and to move forward with greater wisdom. Non-attachment helps them let go of the fear of failure and embrace the challenges that come with entrepreneurship. Another aspect of attachment is the way we cling to our identity. We often identify ourselves with our jobs, roles, achievements, or relationships, believing that these define us. This attachment to our identity can create fear, especially when we face changes in our lives, such as a career shift, a breakup, or an unexpected illness that challenge our sense of self. When we are attached to a specific identity, we feel threatened when it is no longer valid or when it changes. Letting go of this attachment to our identity doesn't mean losing our sense of self. Rather, it means realizing that our true identity is not defined by external factors. We are not our job title, our relationship status, or our bank account balance. Our true identity is much deeper than that, rooted in our essence and our capacity for growth, love, and wisdom. By letting go of the attachment to a specific identity, we free ourselves from the fear of change and embrace the possibility of transformation. In conclusion, letting go of attachment is not about giving up on life or becoming indifferent to our desires and goals. It is about finding freedom from the fear and suffering that arise when we cling too tightly to specific outcomes or possessions. By practicing non-attachment, we can experience greater peace, resilience, and fulfillment. We learn to enjoy the journey, rather than obsessing over the destination, and we approach life's challenges with an open heart and mind. Non-attachment allows us to live more fully, without the constant fear of losing what we think we need to be happy. It helps us find joy in the process, trust in the unfolding of life, and embrace the present moment with greater clarity and equanimity. Patience, or Khanti, is one of the most powerful virtues we can cultivate in our journey toward overcoming fear. In a world that prizes speed, instant gratification, and quick fixes, patience can often seem like an outdated or even unnecessary quality. We live in a fast-paced environment where everything from our food to our relationships is expected to happen immediately. But what if the very antidote to our fears, whether of failure, uncertainty, or the unknown, lies in the quiet practice of patience? In many ways, patience is a revolutionary act in today's society. When fear arises, our first instinct is often to react, whether it's to flee from discomfort, fight to defend ourselves, or freeze in the face of uncertainty. Patience, however, invites us to pause, to breathe, and to resist the urge to act impulsively. It allows us to face fear without being overwhelmed by it. By cultivating patience, we create the mental space to respond thoughtfully rather than reactively, which ultimately empowers us to confront the challenges that life throws our way with grace and resilience. The paradox of patience is that while it often feels like a passive state, simply waiting, holding back, or enduring, it is, in fact, an active choice. It requires conscious effort to remain calm and composed when faced with fear or adversity. The willingness to delay gratification, to withstand discomfort, and to endure uncertainty is a powerful testament to inner strength. When we are patient, we are not passive. We are actively engaged in the process of allowing things to unfold in their own time. In my own life, I've seen how cultivating patience has helped me face fears that once felt insurmountable. I recall a time when I was searching for a new job after a period of uncertainty in my career. The process of applying, interviewing, and waiting for responses was stressful and fraught with anxiety. Each day felt like an endless cycle of rejection, self-doubt, and frustration. The fear of not finding the right job, of being left behind, or of failing in my career was overwhelming at times. At first, my response to this fear was to act impulsively. I sent out countless applications, often without much thought or strategy, simply to keep moving forward and to distract myself from the anxiety. I applied to positions that I wasn't truly interested in, just to avoid the feeling of stagnation. But despite my frantic efforts, nothing seemed to work. The fear of not succeeding only intensified, and I realized that my attempts to rush through the process were only feeding the anxiety. That's when I decided to slow down and embrace patience. I began to view the job search not as a race, but as a journey. I recognized that I couldn't control the outcome, but I could control how I approached the process. Rather than obsessing over the next job application or interview, I focused on improving my skills, expanding my network, and staying grounded in the present moment. I reminded myself that this period of uncertainty, like everything else, would eventually pass. With patience, I was able to transform my fear into a more balanced and thoughtful approach to the process. Over time, the right opportunity presented itself, and I landed a job that I truly valued. This story is just one example of how patience can transform our experience of fear and uncertainty. It's easy to feel overwhelmed when we face challenges or when things don't go according to plan. But the key to navigating these difficult moments lies in our ability to stay present, to acknowledge our fears without letting them control us, and to trust that things will unfold as they are meant to. Patience allows us to take a step back, to regain perspective, and to move forward with a sense of calm and clarity. Patience also teaches us that fear is often a product of our expectations. We fear what we think might happen in the future, based on our anxieties about what is yet to come. But when we practice patience, We learn to let go of the need to control or predict the future. We become more comfortable with uncertainty, and the fear that once felt so overwhelming begins to lose its grip on us. As we wait, we gain the opportunity to reflect, to learn, and to grow stronger in our ability to handle whatever challenges arise. One practical tool that has been especially helpful in moments of fear and anxiety is the mantra, "This too shall pass." It's a simple yet profound reminder that no feeling, no matter how intense, is permanent. Fear, like any other emotion, is fleeting. It ebbs and flows. And when we meet it with patience, we allow it to pass through us rather than getting stuck in it. This mantra serves as a gentle reminder that we don't need to rush through our fears or try to avoid them. We simply need to allow them to come and go in their own time. In moments of fear or doubt, repeating this mantra can help ground us in the present moment. It reminds us that the discomfort we feel right now is not a permanent state. Whether we are facing a difficult conversation, a challenging project at work, or a personal crisis, patience allows us to ride the waves of fear without being swept away by them. We begin to see that fear is not something to be feared in itself, but simply a natural part of our emotional experience. With patience, we can coexist with fear, acknowledging its presence without letting it control us. This approach to fear is especially important when it comes to our relationships. In relationships, whether romantic, familial, or professional, we often experience fear of rejection, conflict, or loss. These fears can cause us to react impulsively, whether by withdrawing, arguing, or attempting to control the other person. But by practicing patience, we create the space to respond thoughtfully, to listen actively, and to engage with others from a place of calm and understanding. Patience in relationships allows us to move beyond fear-driven reactions and to build deeper, more resilient connections with others. For example, in a romantic relationship, there may be moments of tension or disagreement. The fear of conflict can lead us to shut down or lash out. But when we practice patience, we give ourselves the time and space to understand the root of the conflict. We are less likely to react impulsively, and instead, we are more likely to approach the situation with empathy and clarity. We recognize that, just as with any fear, the tension or discomfort we feel in the moment will eventually pass. Patience allows us to approach the situation with a sense of perspective, which in turn enables us to communicate more effectively and to navigate challenges with greater ease. Patience also plays a critical role in how we handle personal growth and transformation. Fear often arises when we feel that we are not making progress quickly enough, or when we compare ourselves to others. The fear of inadequacy or of not measuring up can be paralyzing. But when we practice patience with ourselves, we release the need for instant results. We recognize that growth is a gradual process, and that every step, no matter how small, contributes to our evolution. This is especially true in the context of building new habits or working toward long-term goals. Whether we are trying to improve our health, learn a new skill, or develop a spiritual practice, patience is essential. Progress is rarely linear, and setbacks are inevitable. The fear of failure or the frustration of not seeing immediate results can cause us to give up or become discouraged. But when we embrace patience, we are able to stay committed to the process, trusting that our efforts will eventually bear fruit. We learn to celebrate the small victories along the way, rather than fixating on the end goal. Patience, ultimately, is an act of self-compassion. It involves treating ourselves with kindness and understanding when fear arises, rather than berating ourselves for feeling anxious or uncertain. It is the practice of recognizing that we are human, and that it's okay to feel fear. It's okay to take our time. It's okay to wait. Through patience, we learn to cultivate a deeper sense of trust in ourselves and in the unfolding of life. We recognize that fear is not something to be overcome, but something to be met with compassion and understanding. In conclusion, cultivating patience is one of the most powerful ways we can face our fears and transform them into opportunities for growth. Patience allows us to slow down, to respond thoughtfully, and to approach life's challenges with a sense of calm and resilience. It teaches us to embrace uncertainty, to let go of the need for immediate results, and to trust in the process. By practicing patience, We free ourselves from the tyranny of fear, allowing it to come and go without controlling us. With patience, we can move through life with greater ease, knowing that whatever challenges arise, this too shall pass. Fear, in its many forms, is a natural part of the human experience. It has a way of weaving itself into our lives, often without us even realizing it, until it rears its head in moments of stress, change, or uncertainty. However, what if we began to look at fear not as a formidable enemy, but as an opportunity, a teacher? Even, what if we could see that the fears that stop us from pursuing dreams, building connections, or living fully aren't as real as we believe them to be, and that we hold the key to transforming them into something far more valuable? Stories, whether ancient or modern, have a way of illuminating the lessons that we sometimes fail to see in the chaos of everyday life. These stories offer insights into overcoming fear that resonate deeply with our own experiences. Take, for example, the parable of the mustard seed, one of the oldest and most enduring stories from Buddhist teachings. In this story, a grieving mother, devastated by the loss of her child, seeks the help of the Buddha. She pleads for a remedy, any remedy, that could bring her child back to life. The Buddha listens to her pain, then asks her to gather a mustard seed from any household that has not experienced death. The mother, hopeful, goes door to door, but soon realizes that every household has known the sorrow of loss. Every family, without exception, has faced the death of a loved one. The Buddha's lesson to her was simple, yet profound. Death, like life, is impermanent. It is inevitable. And in that realization, the mother's grief began to transform into acceptance. Through this story, the Buddha illustrates not just the universality of suffering but the impermanence of all things. The mother's attachment to her grief, her fear of living without her child, was rooted in the illusion that death was something permanent, something that could be avoided or escaped. But by embracing impermanence, she learned to face her fear of loss without being consumed by it. Now, let's fast forward to modern-day life. Imagine an entrepreneur, someone who has spent years building a startup, pouring their heart, soul, and financial resources into the venture. At the cusp of launching a new product, they are consumed by fear, the fear of failure, the fear that their hard work will crumble, and the fear of being judged or ridiculed by their peers. Sound familiar? This is a fear that many of us know well, the fear of failing after putting everything on the line. Yet, when this entrepreneur reflects on their journey, they recognize something profound. Each failure they've faced up until this point has been a lesson, a step closer to success. The failed partnerships, the product prototypes that never made it to market, the negative reviews, they are all part of the process. The entrepreneur has learned that fear of failure is not something to avoid, but something to embrace as part of the learning curve. They understand that failure, like success, is impermanent, and in this realization, they find the courage to take the next step, knowing that regardless of the outcome, they are growing and evolving. It is a powerful lesson in reframing fear not as something to paralyze us, but as a catalyst for progress. Both of these stories, the parable of the mustard seed and the modern-day entrepreneur, illustrate a key lesson about fear. It is often rooted in our attachment to outcomes. When we fear loss, failure, or the unknown, we are clinging to a vision of how we want things to be. We are afraid because we cannot control the future, and we cannot predict the outcome. In many ways, our attachment to specific outcomes creates fear. The mother in the parable was attached to the idea that her child's death could somehow be avoided. The entrepreneur, too, was attached to the outcome of success, and the fear of failure arose from that attachment. However, when we learn to let go of rigid expectations and embrace uncertainty, we free ourselves from the grip of fear. Letting go does not mean giving up. It means finding peace in the process, regardless of the outcome. Reflecting on these stories can help us gain perspective in our own lives. How often do we let fear dictate our decisions, or stop us from taking the first step towards something we deeply desire? When was the last time fear prevented you from living fully, whether it was pursuing a new career, reaching out to someone you care about, or expressing your creativity? Many of us have had moments in life when fear held us back. whether consciously or subconsciously. But it is important to remember that fear, at its core, is often an illusion, a mental construct that we create in response to uncertainty. When we begin to recognize fear for what it is, we can start to dismantle its power. One of the most profound ways to challenge fear is to shift our perspective. Much like the entrepreneur did, fear of failure can be paralyzing, but reframing failure as part of the process transforms it from something to be feared into something to be embraced. For example, Thomas Edison famously said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Edison's approach to failure wasn't one of avoidance. It was one of curiosity and perseverance. Every failure was simply another piece of information that brought him closer to the solution. This mindset is transformative, not just in the context of entrepreneurship, but in all aspects of life. Whether we are navigating relationships, career transitions, or personal growth, reframing fear and failure as learning opportunities can change the way we approach challenges. It's not always easy to shift our mindset in the face of fear, but mindfulness can help us stay grounded in the present moment. Fear often arises from our mind's tendency to project into the future, imagining worst-case scenarios that may never come to pass. By practicing mindfulness, we bring our attention back to the here and now, acknowledging our fear without letting it take over. A simple exercise, like taking a few deep breaths and bringing awareness to our body, can help us create the mental space to respond to fear with clarity rather than reacting impulsively. Mindfulness is not about suppressing or avoiding fear. It's about meeting fear with compassion and curiosity, allowing it to exist without letting it control us. Another important lesson in overcoming fear comes from understanding that suffering is a universal part of the human condition. In Buddhism, the concept of dukkha refers to the inherent dissatisfaction and suffering that comes with being human. Fear is one of the many forms of suffering that we all experience, but it is not unique to us. When we understand that fear, like all forms of suffering, is part of being human, we begin to feel less isolated in our struggles. It is a shared experience, one that connects us to others. We are not alone in our fears. Whether we are facing the fear of failure, the fear of loss, or the fear of the unknown, we can take comfort in knowing that these fears are universal. Just as the mother in the mustard seed story found solace in the shared experience of loss, so too can we find strength in the knowledge that fear is something we all face. In this way, fear becomes less of a burden and more of a common thread that binds us together. In every story of fear, there is a turning point, a moment when the individual faces their fear head-on and decides to move forward despite it. It is in these moments that real transformation occurs. It may be the mother's realization that death is inevitable, or the entrepreneur's decision to take the next step in their business despite the risk of failure. These are moments of choice, where fear can either hold us back or propel us forward. And the beauty of these stories is that they remind us that we have the power to choose how we respond to fear. We can choose to let fear define us, or we can choose to redefine fear and use it as a tool for growth. So, the next time fear arises, ask yourself, is this fear based on a real threat, or is it simply a story my mind is telling me? Fear often stems from our mental narratives, the stories we tell ourselves about what might happen in the future, what we might lose, or what we are afraid to face. By questioning these narratives, we take away their power and regain control. It's not that fear disappears entirely, but rather that it no longer holds the same weight. We learn to coexist with it, to see it for what it truly is, and to move forward despite it. Ultimately, the key to overcoming fear lies in our ability to shift our perspective, to practice mindfulness, and to let go of attachment to outcomes. Fear will always be a part of our lives, but it does not have to control us. By embracing fear as a natural part of the human experience, we can transform it into an ally, a source of wisdom, growth, and resilience. And in doing so, we can live more fully, more authentically, and with greater courage. Wow, if you've made it this far, then you've already taken the first step toward embracing fear as a powerful teacher in your life. You've learned that fear, while it may feel like an obstacle, is really a sign of something much deeper, a chance for growth. a message urging you to step into the unknown with courage, and a reminder that everything in life is temporary. Through understanding impermanence, cultivating mindfulness, and releasing attachment to specific outcomes, you can transform fear from something paralyzing into something that propels you forward. Just think about it. Every time you face your fear with an open heart, you're creating space for wisdom to arise. You're creating the foundation for a life full of possibilities, where courage and wisdom are your constant companions. Now, here's where you come in. You have everything you need within you to begin this journey today. You don't need to wait for the fear to disappear because it won't. Instead, take a step forward with the tools you've just learned and start transforming your relationship with fear, one small step at a time. If this video has inspired you, if you're ready to take that first step, then I invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, so you can continue to explore the lessons and practices that will help you live a life of courage and wisdom. Also, share this video with someone you know who might be struggling with fear. They don't have to face it alone. And before you go, remember, the most important thing is not to be perfect, but to be present. Fear is part of being human, but so is the ability to turn that fear into something beautiful. This journey is yours to take, and I'm here with you every step of the way. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, take that next step. Fear is not your enemy. It's your teacher, and you're ready to learn.